It was a defining day in the race for the top 8. Jack Henry, the hero, as the Cats win a classic. The Blues dominate the Dockers and the Swans pile more misery on the Saints. Hello and welcome to The Round So Far, brought to you by Amy. I'm Riley Beveridge. This is Kane Cornes. Kane, as we said, it was a massive day. Let's get straight into it. Start at the MCG, the big story. Geelong wins what could be the game of the year.
Game of the year. How about the momentum swings in this game? Cats led it by 35 points at one stage early. The Tigers went out to a 17-point lead. There's the hanger from Revolt, which was overturned. There's the free kick there against Lynch to De Koning there. What a moment that was. And this was pivotal in the game because it ended up Geelong going down and doing this. I mean, they had some great players, including Stengel, and Cameron was enormous. Both of those players kicked 3 goals each today, and their forwards are on fire right across the board. But this, you thought, was going to be the moment with under 3 minutes on the clock. Rioli took that mark and went back with ice in his veins, and you think, well, can they hold on with 2 minutes to go? But in the end, it was that man that you mentioned, Stengel, involved again from the centre bounce, and Henry takes his big contested mark at the top of the goal square and puts the Cats in front. You see the scenes there, and they held on for a thrilling 3-point win. It could have gone either way. Really well done to both teams. Richmond with one down. We'll get to the reasons behind that now, but a really brave performance from a very, very good side. Both of these sides, you think, are going to feature at the end of the year.
You mentioned the Tigers were a man down. That was Dion Prestia early in the game because of this incident involving Tom Stewart. This was ugly.
Yeah, what do you think? Like, you are more of a guru in this space than what I am. Sort of gut feel says minimum 3, but probably out to 4.
Yeah, I think it'll be intentional. If it's intentional high, that'll be 3 matches. But if it's intentional severe, and you'd have to think it's severe given the way that Dion Prestia, I mean, he was clearly knocked out and it was a bad concussion. He was down for quite a long time. So I reckon it's severe. If it is intentional and severe, it goes straight to the tribunal. But importantly there, it's a minimum of 4 games at the tribunal if he is found guilty. Speaking after the game, this is what Chris Scott had to say.
When I spoke to him post-game, he said, "I've just made a horrible error and I feel terrible about it." He said, "I ran past the ball and I chose to bump. I didn't mean to do it, but gee, it was terrible execution and I'm going to pay the price for it." He knows he's done the wrong thing. Was it deliberate? Of course it wasn't. He's made an error, and as people do that I admire, he's prepared to stand up and say, "I was wrong."
So Chris Scott there, important to note, it's not an admission of intent, but he did say that Tom Stewart knew he'd gone past the ball. Whether or not that's taken into account by the match review officer and then potentially subsequently the tribunal as well as a guideline that is intentional as opposed to careless, that's the big question.
Yeah, it's an ordinary act. I mean, he's run past the football and he's bumped him high in a space where we know that that's not allowed. So I admire Chris Scott for his coaching. I admire Tom Stewart for the admission after the game. But the thought's got to be with Dion Prestia. It was an ugly act that shouldn't happen on a football field in 2022, and he'll cop his right whack. It's not saying he's a bad person or anything like that, but that was an ordinary football act. It was ugly. It shouldn't have happened, and he'll pay the price for that, and rightly so.
Tom Stewart ended up going on and being perhaps the best player on the field. He finished with 29 disposals, 745 metres gained and 17 intercepts, all ranked number 1 on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that was the credit to him, was that, you know, Chris Scott, you saw the images of him speaking to him at quarter time. He said, you can only really focus and stay in the moment, and he did that, and we're seeing that these really crucial one-on-one contests that he's been so good at winning for, you know, the last 6 or 7 years of his career. 17 intercepts, you mentioned. He does it both ways. Look at his the football IQ to position yourself there with 40 seconds to go, and that was another intercept mark where he saves the game for Geelong. Incredible player.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's little solace for Dion Prestia and the Richmond fans today.
We'll head to Marvel Stadium now, where Carlton completely outplayed Fremantle. Michael Voss saying it was the Blues' best performance of the season. It was all inspired by this forward pressure forward of the ball.
Absolutely ferocious. So you've got to admire Carlton. I thought with the injuries that they had out and their makeshift defence that they had in today, I thought, and it looked as though that might happen in the first quarter, that Fremantle through Taberner and others were able to expose Carlton's underside defence, but it was because of this pressure that the ball came in like this. They were able to turn it over. They got massive dominance from stoppage. They actually beat up Fremantle. We've been raving on this show about Fremantle and their strength around the stoppages and how they've been able to score from it. Carlton were just terrific right across the board. All game, this relentless pressure that they applied. 17 forward 50 tackles, which is their most for the year. And it was, as I said, across the board, such an even performance. That's finals footy. They deserve to play finals. It's been an incredible story this year.
Sam Walsh was outstanding. He is our Saturday star. thanks to Taylor Made. He had 40 disposals, 7 clearances, 6 score involvements, 11 inside 50.
Yeah, well, he's the one that got them going, particularly in the second quarter. Had 16 disposals in that quarter alone. So his ability to hunt the ground ball, I thought today, now that they had massive ground ball numbers. So that's what I'm witnessing when I'm watching Walsh. So he wins that ground ball footy as good as anyone in the competition. And then his strength to his game has been to be able to burst away from those areas. So Cripps was big there. So that first sort of 2 or 3 steps where he can burst away, and then you get these clean entries inside 50. What a kick from Nunes that was to Curnow. But yeah, once again, ground ball and then burst away. So that was the maximum damage, I thought, for his touches. And that's where midfielders getting huge numbers across the board in the competition, but you're rating them on metres gained and the damage they're doing with the footy, and he was clearly the best player on the ground today and probably his best game for the year.
When Fremantle played Carlton earlier in the year, Sean Darcy really got on top of Tom De Koning. I thought this was just about Tom De Koning's best performance in his career.
Phenomenal. We remember Darcy attacked Pitnet in that centre bounce and damaged his knee, and that was sort of the catalyst for Fremantle's performance earlier on in the year. But this centre bounce tap work, now the clearances, as I mentioned, they were plus 14 for clearances on the day. It was 14-5 at the all-important centre bounce clearances, and his hit-outs to advantage today were massive, so he had 8 of those. He's 22. He's out of contract at the end of next year. Now, I'm hearing Luke Jackson's worth $1 million. He's got to be 800,000 to 900,000. Like he does, honestly. Well, what player has improved as much as him, can play forward, can play ruck like that, and have that impact in the centre bounce? Some of that stuff was Nat Nui-like from the centre bounce. So good luck to Carlton. I think you told me off air that Mackay and Curnow and De Koning are all out of contract at the end of next year. I don't know how they're going to fit them all in. But that kid there, someone's going to come for him at $800,000 to $900,000 a year, so look out.
He was awesome, and he's got a lot of potential as well. One contentious tribunal decision to another, Nat Fyfe. Do you think he's in any danger for this, making contact with umpire? Now, he was pushed by Matt Cottrell. You have to consider that.
I don't want to see anyone suspended for that. That's sort of incidental contact. But if all the Warriors on Toby Green were saying you can't touch an umpire and he got 6, if Green got 6 and you scale that down, that's 2 weeks. So if you're consistent with what Toby Green copped, 6 for that incident last year, then yes, that's less, but it's still touching an umpire, which a lot of people are saying you can't do. So I think that comes out at 1 or 2 weeks. I really think it does.
It's interesting. It's going to be a big 24 hours for Michael Christian. We'll head to the SCG now. St Kilda 3 losses on the trot. They were absolutely smashed by Sydney. It was this little burst in the third term where they kicked 4 goals in 10 minutes that really took the game away.
Oh, they're in trouble, St Kilda. It was a really good response from Sydney, and as you mentioned, these 4 goals here, but just look at the ease in which this happens. I mean, a couple of free kicks there and you take the advantage. You're going to see Papley run into the open goal essentially here from a Franklin free kick, but it was just, Sydney were terrific right across the board. Look at the flair from Florent there. It was terrific across half-back. I thought their half-backs in general, Lloyd had massive numbers. Blakey, his best game for the year, and Florent was awesome as well. And the forward options as well. I mean, they've been very reliant on Franklin, who started the game particularly well, but only kicked the 1 goal. Hayward, Heaney again, Parker went forward. They got Reid down there as well. So a terrific performance from Sydney. I know they beat Melbourne a couple of weeks ago at the MCG, but that was a full 4-quarter performance tonight, and I reckon that was their best performance offensively and defensively for the year.
Now, your biggest bugbear, the 10-metre protected zone rule, struck again tonight at the SCG.
I'm just going to keep shouting this down until we have change. I'm thinking about starting a petition on this. How this can be 50 metres for the protected zone there on Gould, and I'm bewildered by that. I can't get my head around it. It's the worst decision I've seen this year, so it's an error.
That's just a mistake.
It's an error from the umpire, but the rule across the board has to go, and there has to be some feel for if the player isn't holding it up and he's trying to get out of the area, then just let them play, because that costs a goal. St Kilda could hardly score, and they got a cheap goal from a 50 that shouldn't have been paid. So I'm going to keep shouting and screaming on this show. I know it's an AFL show, so Brad Scott, I hope you're listening. Make a change.
Now, Zach Jones, it's going to be another worrying 24 hours for him. Does he have anything to worry about here for this bump on Luke Parker?
He's lucky that Parker got up and continued and was important, but he jumps, he bumps, and he gets him high. So, yes, to answer your question, he does. Now, fortunately, Parker is okay, but yeah, I wouldn't want to be Zach Jones having another look at that, and that's one he'll have to answer for this week.
St Kilda's lost 3 straight. Are you concerned for them? They drop out of the top 8 now. They were top 4 going into the bye rounds.
Yeah.
Coming out of the bye rounds, they're out of the 8.
They're done. They were vulnerable, as we said 2 weeks ago on this show, and we put up their draw and we noticed how hard it was. You're not kicking 2 goals until the late stage of the last quarter against a side that's in and around the same spot as you and doing anything this year. Yeah. So, like, as promising as the start was, they have a lack of forward options. They couldn't move the ball with any fluidity. They missed tackle after tackle. They actually out-tackled Sydney tonight, but some of the ones they missed on the back of 38 tackles last week. Now, Brett Ratton said it was their worst performance last week, and then there was no response. So I'd be incredibly concerned if I was St Kilda and they could drop right down the ladder this year, particularly with how even it is with Gold Coast and Collingwood and Port Adelaide coming hard.
Well, let's look at the ladder now. As we mentioned off the top, it was a defining day. There's now 5 teams within 1 game of top spot, which is incredible.
Well, it's a great season of footy. It's made it really interesting. I mean, Melbourne, we'll get to that in a moment. They just flexed their muscles. But Geelong with their draw, as we've said repeatedly on this show from about 5 weeks ago, they just finished top 4 with their draw, and then the battle's on.
Yeah. It's going to be a massive couple of days. Collingwood can go into the top 8 if they beat GWS on Sunday, so it's going to be an interesting day of footy as well. We'll head to our Amy Clangers now. We will start at the SCG. This is not something you want to see. Cal Wilkie. Wait for the replay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been on the end of this in your footy career.
Don't really want to watch the replay, but they actually got the real zoom in, and that just hurts.
It's an ugly one. Now, I couldn't believe this. James Sicily's copped a $1,000 misconduct fine for this, for pulling off Aaron Norton's headband.
The only person that should be getting fined is Norton for wearing that headband. Like, come on. We're fining players for that.
No, it brought back some memories. Bruce Still. You don't want to do that to Bruce Still.
Don't do that to Bruce.
In the day. Now, this next one, this is rarely seen. This was Thursday night. The old double falcon.
Double falcon.
Michael Dublé hit Langdon, then on to Spargo. Bang, bang, bonk, bonk. And now, you want to raise this, Kane. Bailey Fritsch, what's he doing? You've got to give it to one of the best players in the game is running past you.
Give it! I couldn't believe it. They conceded the first 3, and then that also happened at the start of the game. I was like, oh my God, they're off here. But that's a goal. I mean, Petrarca's kicked, what's he kicked, 9? 21 for the year.
Yeah.
I think he's had 40 shots and he's kicked 9 goals. That's a gimme, and he got burnt like that. Yeah. So he won't forget that in a hurry.
We will stay at the MCG on Thursday night. The D's had lost 3 straight. They'd lost their captain going into it. But this is the Melbourne of old. This is the Melbourne that we remember.
Oh, this was awesome. This was as good as I've seen. They were ferocious, and it was the front half footy that they played. Brisbane couldn't transition the ball because of the pressure. It was a smashing. It was a mauling, plus 67 disposals, 38 for contested. They had 19 more inside 50s. And 11 more clearances. They scored 77 points from Brisbane turnovers, and these are highlighted by, Jack Viney's hit there. He was just, it's as good a midfield game and as ferocious a performance from any individual I've seen this year. Jack Viney, he was huge, and Melbourne feasted off the turnover. So if they bring that and they play with that intensity to get after the opposition, then no one's going to beat them. It's just whether they can sustain that and when they're healthy at the right time of the year.
You mentioned Jack Viney stepped up from a leadership perspective without Max Gorm. Well, Luke Jackson stepped up from a ruck perspective. He was awesome, and he did that contract value of his absolutely no harm.
Yeah, so I said pre-game it was a huge night for him, clearly, because I reckon he'd just been going. And that's because Gorn's the guy, and he's a bit part player in a sense, and he's not a natural forward, I don't think. So he responded. Simon Goodwin spoke after the game about how intense he'd been at training and how he set himself. So there's not many players that can do that are above 200 centimetres in the game. So that's where the potential talk of the $1 million contracts come from. And then to have the confidence to call for a handball receive and to hit a target inside 50, lace out like that. I mean, there's 1 or 2 ruckmen that can do that in the game. So that's why everyone is speaking about his potential. But it was an important night for him, I thought, and he certainly delivered.
Pretty damning night for the Lions. First 9 weeks of the season, they were just about the best defensive team in the comp. But have a look at this. The last 5 weeks, they've conceded 96 points or more 4 times.
Yeah, so once again, I mean, the premiership winning teams are usually top 3 or 4 defensively and offensively as well. Now, we don't have too many questions about their offence prior to this night here against Melbourne, but this is the concern. I mean, even their wins, they've conceded big scores, so that's an issue that they'll need to tidy up if they want to have any say in this season.
We'll head to Marvel Stadium on Friday night now, where the Dogs got over the line against Hawthorn. Slow start, they won 13, kicked 13 straight goals though to really power over the line.
That was the moment. That turned the momentum. That's Libba again. So we mentioned Viney. I thought Libba, so Viney and Libba of a similar position that they play, similar size, had maximum impact, and that was the contested ball win that led to that Riley West goal, and wasn't he terrific?
Awesome.
I mean, we spoke about him last week. You love his aerial ability.
Yeah, he's such a clean one-touch player. I think you find this a lot with father-son prospects who have been in the system from a very young age. Look at that tap on there to Josh Shackey. He kicks the goal. He's just such a clean play. Everything is one take with Riley West, and I think that's why he's been able to carve out this sort of high half-forward niche for himself. He was great last week, and he's been really inspirational in the Dogs reviving their season, because they looked done 3 or 4 weeks ago. We've spoken about that a couple of times now, but they're right back in it. And you want to speak about their scores from stoppage, because we know they're a great midfield team, but they've been able to profit from it now.
Yeah, and the names are in there. This is what they should be delivering. When you look at their depth, they got the best midfield depth in the competition. McRae, Dunkley, Bont, Bailey Smith when he comes back in. We've lauded Libba and Treloar and others, but that's what you want to see. So they're the best clearance team in the competition, but now they're doing it on the scoreboard. So since round 10, 50 plus points from stoppage, and they're in good form. They've won 5 out of the last 6, and that's a game they had to win. Because their draw, I don't think, is that complimentary to stay in touch. But they play like that, then they're going to be a tricky prospect on the run home. It's
going to be an interesting clash against Brisbane next week. Let's head to Optus Oval. Also on Friday night, West Coast finally snapping this losing streak. They beat an Essendon side that was bitterly disappointing.
Yeah, so this was the late Friday night game. If you stayed up for it, it was their efficiency inside 50 that did the damage. And we'll get to Essendon and how poor they defend and how poor they've defended all year. But 42 entries for 27 scoring shots. And this patch here, they kicked 10 goals straight without a miss. And so whenever you see players bombing up, marking the ball uncontested inside 50 in 15 metres of space, you know there's something wrong with the opposition defence, or they've turned the footy over in a really bad spot. This is what I'm talking about. So uncontested mark chain, which leads to uncontested mark inside 50, and an epic goal from Kennedy. What a player. You thought, he didn't have many more 5+ goal performances in him, but he turned back the clock. And Adam Simpson said after the game that whenever they need to kick a goal in a big moment, he rarely, if ever, misses. So he's in the Robbie Gray category as probably the most clutch player in the competition right now.
I love it. Ben Rutten, speaking after the game, said they really missed Darcy Parish and Andy McGrath.
Yeah, whenever you got a couple of really key leaders and players, consistent performance for you out, it does stretch. You need to ask a bit more of other guys, but generally I think our guys have been handling that, and I think that's where the growth of our group is. They need those experiences and opportunities.
I can't stand that answer. I understand he's been asked the question about the 2 key players that are missing, but when you look at the injury list from both teams, that is not an excuse. I mean, Essendon, there's the comparable injury list, and a few of those players, yes, McGrath and Parish are there, but the others haven't had a massive say this year. When you compare that to the Eagles and Oscar Allen and Nat Nui and McGovern and the premiership players, I think there's 4 on that list that they've got. Sheed as well. They're not comparable. So the excuses aren't there for Essendon. The reason you're not winning is because you refuse to defend. You refuse to defend the opposition transitioning the ball from their D50 to their forward 50. That's the reason. It's not McGrath and Parish missing. So I thought that was an ordinary response, and it comes across as an excuse that shouldn't be there for Ben Rutten.
Just quickly, do you like the Friday doubleheaders?
I'd rather the Friday doubleheader if it means we only have the one Saturday night game.
Yeah.
So the less games overlapping, the better. So that led to that this Saturday, and didn't we have an awesome Saturday of footy?
It was a massive day. It's going to be just as big on Sunday, though. Collingwood can get into the top 8 if they beat GWS. Who'd have thought we'd be saying that at round 15 before the start of the year? Then an elimination final, really. Port Adelaide against Gold Coast.
Can North do it?
Maybe.
Can North? Glenn Archer will be in the rooms. There'll be a good feeling for Jackson making his debut for North, and you would hope that the North Melbourne players seeing Glenn Archer in the change rooms and his son playing his first game, there would be some sort of response. So, danger game for the Crows. It's going to be a big Sunday of footy. I love it.
Can't wait for that. Kane, see you next week. Hopefully it's just as good.